Liam, the group's de facto leader, always carried a map and a quiet intensity. Sarah, with her perpetually smudged glasses, was their resident lore master, digging up obscure local legends. Mark, the impulsive one, was all bravado and raw strength, eager for any dare. And Chloe, the sharp-witted skeptic, often masked her unease with sarcasm. They were the Nocturne Explorers, thrill-seekers addicted to the adrenaline of the unknown, chasing urban legends to tell stories that would make skin crawl. The sun had long vanished, leaving the sky a canvas of bruised purples as they pushed deeper into Blackwood Forest. It wasn't officially forbidden, but whispers among locals had woven a thick web of fear around its ancient trees, tales of disappearances, of a pervasive gloom. The air grew colder, biting at their exposed skin, carrying the damp scent of decaying leaves. The canopy above them was a dense, interlocking puzzle of skeletal branches, allowing only slivers of fading twilight to filter through, casting long, distorted shadows. The silence was profound, broken only by their boots crunching on leaf litter and the rapid thumping of their own hearts. Liam held his compass steady. Sarah clutched her worn notebook. Mark swung his heavy-duty flashlight, and Chloe kept glancing over her shoulder. After an hour of trudging, Sarah gasped softly. "There," she whispered, pointing. Tucked away in a small, almost perfectly circular clearing, stood the well. It was ancient, undeniably so. Massive, roughly hewn stones, discolored by centuries of moisture and moss, formed a squat, ominous cylinder. Iron bands, rusted to a deep, flaky orange, hugged its circumference. But what truly held their gaze was the lid, a massive slab of dark, unpolished granite, held in place by thick, corroded chains looping around the well's base and anchored to deeply embedded iron rings in the earth. Indecipherable, alien runes were crudely carved into the stone, almost worn flat by time, yet still discernible in Mark's flashlight beam. A chill snaked down Liam's spine. This wasn't just old, it felt deliberate, sealed. "So this is it," Mark said, his voice a shade less confident. "The Well of Whispers. Sarah, the story." Sarah hesitated. "Locals say it's a gateway, not to water but to something else. Ancient. They sealed it centuries ago after things started happening. People vanishing, strange sounds, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. A witch or shaman bound whatever was inside, then sealed it. For good." Her voice trailed, unease replacing her usual academic tone. "A gateway? To the local pub's basement." Chloe scoffed, but her eyes betrayed her. "Probably a dry well or a cesspit, with a spooky story to keep kids out." "No, Chloe, look," Liam interjected, his gaze fixed on the slab. "This isn't just a lid. This is a seal. Those chains, those carvings. Someone put immense effort into keeping this shut." He felt a faint hum beneath the cold stone. "Exactly." Mark grinned, bravado returning. "Something worth keeping shut. This is what we came for, isn't it? The real deal. Imagine the stories." He moved to a rusted chain. "Hold on, Mark," Liam said, doubt flickering. "Maybe we just observe, document. We don't have to open it." "Are you kidding, Liam?" Mark looked incredulous. "We came all this way just to look? That's not the Nocturne Explorers. We push boundaries. We unveil secrets." Sarah Torn bit her lip. "The legends warn against disturbing it. They say whatever was sealed within, it hungers for freedom." "Old wives' tales," Chloe countered, though her conviction wavered. "Probably a moonshiner's stash." But the lure was too strong. Mark was already testing the chains. "Old but solid. We just need leverage." Liam knew he should stop them. Every fiber screamed to turn back. But the thrill, the promise of discovery, was intoxicating. He looked at Mark's determination, Sarah's conflict, Chloe's feigned indifference. They were all in this together. "All right," Liam conceded, the word heavy. "But we're careful, very careful. We just peek. No going down. No messing with anything inside." "Deal," Mark exclaimed. He began to examine the chains. They creaked, a tortured metal sound echoing in the silent forest. "Chloe, despite her skepticism, moved closer, her flashlight dancing over the ruins. Sarah pulled out her phone, ready to record. It took all three, Mark, Liam, and Chloe, to shift the ancient slab. Mark strained, muscles bulging, as he pulled a corroded chain. Liam and Chloe braced, pushing and prying. The air grew thick with rust and damp stone. A low, grinding groan, like earth protesting, vibrated through the clearing as the granite scraped against the well's rim. Sarah gasped. A wave of indescribable cold, deeper than the evening chill, washed over them, carrying an alien scent. Stagnant water, decay, and something metallic, acrid, like old blood and ozone, pricked their throats. With a final heave, the lid shifted, revealing a jagged, black void. No sound emerged, no wind, no echo, only profound, unnatural silence. But they felt it, an immense pressure in the air, as if the atmosphere solidified. A prickling sensation on their skin, like unseen insects. The air grew heavy, suffocating, charged with an invisible, malevolent energy that made hairs stand on end. A whisper, so faint it could be wind or mind trick, slithered from the darkness below, coiling around them. Not a language, but a sound resonating deep within their primal fear. Liam's breath caught. Mark's bravado evaporated, leaving him pale, terrified. Sarah stood frozen, phone trembling. Chloe, for the first time, looked truly, utterly terrified, eyes wide with dawning horror. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of a terrible, unseen presence. They hadn't just opened a well, they had opened a door, and something had just stepped through. The forest, merely quiet before, now felt watchful, predatory. The very air hummed with a terrifying new life. They were no longer alone. The indescribable wave of cold that emanated from the well petrified them. It wasn't just the temperature dropping, but a frost that seemed to nestle in their bones, draining the warmth and color from the world. The air, which had merely been dense before, now pulsed with an invisible energy, weighing down on their shoulders like a slab of lead. Liam felt his heart beating like a lopsided war drum, adrenaline mixing with a primal fear he had never known. Mark, whose face was pale beneath the beam of his flashlight, let the device fall with a dull thud, the shaft of light trembling on the mossy ground. Sarah let out a muffled whimper, her wide eyes fixed on the darkness of the well, as if she saw something beyond the mere absence of light. Chloe, the skeptic, was frozen, her usual sarcasm undone in a mask of pure terror, her mouth slightly open in shocked silence. The whisper that emerged from the abyss was not an audible sound, but a vibration that resonated in their eardrums, in the deepest part of their brains. It was a promise of pain, of despair, of an insatiable hunger seeking them out. The silence that followed brought no relief. It was a predatory silence, full of an unspeakable presence that enveloped them. Liam tried to scream, but his throat was dry, his lungs refusing to obey. The survival instinct took over. "The chains," he finally managed to force out, his voice a ragged gasp. "Close it, close it." Mark, as if awakened from a trance, staggered toward the granite slab. He tried to push, but the seal seemed incredibly heavy now, anchored by a force that was not physical. Liam and Chloe joined him, their muscles screaming as they strained against the immovable mass. The metallic screech that once accompanied the opening of the well was now a mocking moan. It was useless. The slab seemed fused to the ground, or perhaps the invisible presence was holding it open. A cold, bodiless laugh seemed to echo in their ears, not coming from the well, but from all directions at once. "We're not going to make it," Chloe gasped, despair coloring her voice. "Run, now." Without hesitation, they turned and ran. Adrenaline fueled their bodies, but every step was a battle against an invisible resistance in the air. The forest, which had once seemed familiar, was now a twisted nightmare of dancing shadows and skeletal trees. The sound of their own footsteps, ragged breathing, and the pounding of their hearts were the only noises in a world that had become eerily silent. No crickets, no birds, no rustling leaves. Blackwood Forest had gone quiet, as if holding its breath, watching. Liam led, his map now useless in his trembling hand. Every shadow seemed to stretch, every branch to contort into monstrous forms. The sensation of being watched, of being hunted, pierced their necks. Mark, running close behind, stumbled and fell, but got up in an instant, his wild eyes sweeping the darkness. "Did you feel that?" he gasped, his voice thick with terror. "Something brushed against me." Sarah, right behind Mark, squeezed her eyes shut, almost crying. "The air, it's suffocating me. And I heard a whisper. My name. Someone called me." Chloe, though trembling, tried to keep her composure. "It must be your imagination, Sarah. It's the panic. We're all scared." But her voice failed on the last word, betraying her own fear. She looked back at the darkness swallowing the trail they'd come from. Nothing, but the sensation of pursuit was palpable, like a cold hand on their backs. They ran without direction, losing the trail, the trees becoming an indistinct blur. The ground beneath their feet seemed to change, becoming softer, wetter, as if they were stepping into a primordial swamp. The icy air now carried a different smell, not just earth and rot, but old flesh and a metallic scent, almost electric. It was the smell of the curse. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound echoed from the darkness behind them. It wasn't a branch breaking, but something drier, crunchier, like bones. And then, a distinct whisper, clearer this time but still unintelligible, brushed Liam's ear. It was as if the voice was inside his own head, not coming from outside. He stumbled, nearly falling. "What was that, Liam?" Mark asked, his voice a thread. Liam couldn't answer. He was paralyzed by the sound of a scream, not a scream of pain, but one of pure, visceral terror, cut off abruptly. It was Sarah's scream. They turned, their flashlights trembling, slicing through the darkness. But there was nothing. Sarah had disappeared. There was no sign of struggle, no sound of a fall, just emptiness where she had been a second before. The leaves on the ground were undisturbed, and the grass remained untouched. She simply was no longer there. The silence that followed the cut-off scream was more terrifying than any sound, filled only by the terror in their own hearts. Liam, Mark, and Chloe looked at each other, wide-eyed, horror settling in as undeniable truth. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't imagination. The curse had claimed its first victim, and they knew with a cold, terrible certainty that it wouldn't be the last. The immediate aftermath of Sarah's disappearance was a horrifying vacuum. Liam, Mark, and Chloe stood frozen, their flashlights carving trembling arcs through the oppressive gloom, illuminating nothing but ancient trees and a carpet of decaying leaves. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until it was shattered by Mark's raw, guttural cry. "Sarah, Sarah, where are you?" His voice, usually so full of bravado, was thin, cracking with disbelief. He lunged forward, stumbling over roots, his frantic calls echoing in the suddenly vast and empty forest. Liam, his heart hammering against his ribs, joined the desperate search, his own voice a hoarse croak. "Sarah, can you hear me?" He swept his beam across every shadow, every cluster of ferns, but there was no sign, no rustle, no sound of struggle. It was as if she had been erased, absorbed by the very air. Chloe, her face ashen, stood rooted to the spot, her eyes wide with a terror that surpassed any fear Liam had ever seen in her. Her usual cynicism had completely crumbled, leaving behind a stark, naked horror. She's gone," Chloe whispered, the words barely audible, a chilling confirmation of the impossible. She just vanished. A cold dread, more profound than any physical chill, settled deep within Liam's bones. This wasn't a prank, nor an accident. This was something else, something utterly malevolent and beyond human comprehension. The entity from the well. It was real. It was here, and it was hunting them. "We have to go," Liam finally managed, pulling Mark back from his frantic, futile search. "Now, we have to get out of here." The word "run" felt inadequate. They needed to flee, to escape this nightmare that had materialized around them. Without a second thought, they bolted, A desperate, blind dash through the unforgiving forest. The oppressive cold clung to them, seeping into their clothes, their skin, chilling them to the core. The air itself felt heavier, like moving through thick syrup, offering a strange, invisible resistance with every step. Their ragged breaths tore at their lungs, each gasp a desperate plea for escape. The Blackwood Forest, once merely a place of thrill-seeking, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and whispering malevolence. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a pursuing footstep, every creak of a branch like a skeletal hand reaching out. Mark, no longer the fearless adventurer, was a trembling mess, his eyes darting wildly into the darkness. "It's still here," he choked out, his voice a frantic whisper. "I can feel it. It's watching us." He stumbled again, catching himself on a thorny bush, leaving streaks of blood on his torn sleeve. Chloe, usually so composed, was on the verge of hysterics. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her head snapping from side to side as if trying to catch a glimpse of something just beyond the edge of their vision. "I hear it," she whimpered, her voice tight with suppressed screams. "Whispers. It's speaking to me. Telling me things?" She clutched her head, swaying slightly, her grip on reality visibly fraying. Liam tried to focus, to find a landmark, anything that would guide them out of this hellish maze. But the trees seemed to shift, paths they swore they had just taken vanished, and the forest floor became increasingly uneven, a treacherous mix of exposed roots and muddy hollows. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine needles was now overlaid with a cloying metallic stench, like blood and rust, growing stronger with every frantic stride. It was the scent of the curse, a predatory aroma that seemed to tighten its grip around their throats. "Stay together," Liam yelled, his voice cracking, trying to instill some semblance of order in their panicked flight. He reached for Mark's arm, but his hand seemed to pass through empty air. He felt a faint, phantom brush, like cobwebs, but there was nothing there. Yet the sensation was so vivid, it made his skin crawl. The unseen entity was no longer content with mere whispers and cold air. It was starting to play with them, to toy with their senses, to break their minds before it took their bodies. The shadows around them deepened, becoming impossibly dense, seeming to writhe and stretch into grotesque caricatures of skeletal figures. The silence, once profound, was now punctuated by faint, unsettling sounds, not footsteps, but a sound like dry leaves being dragged across stone, or the faint, distant clicking of chitinous legs. Suddenly, Chloe gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath. She stumbled, her flashlight beam swinging wildly, illuminating a patch of ground where the moss seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly green light. For a fleeting second, Liam thought he saw something move within the light, a shadowy form, impossibly thin, impossibly tall, dissolving into the deeper darkness before he could truly register it. "What was that?" Mark cried, spinning around, his terror-filled eyes searching the gloom. Chloe didn't answer. She was staring, transfixed, at a gnarled tree trunk nearby. Her eyes were wide, filled with a dawning, soul-shattering horror. Her lips parted, as if to scream, but no sound emerged. She pointed a trembling finger at something Liam couldn't see, something beyond the tree, deeper in the impenetrable blackness. A chilling, wet squelch echoed from the direction Chloe was pointing, a sound that made Liam's stomach lurch. It was followed by a sound like something heavy being dragged away, quickly, silently, through the undergrowth. Not a human sound, not an animal sound. "Chloe," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible, shaking with an unbearable dread. "Chloe, what is it?" But Chloe was no longer there. Her flashlight, dropped into sudden, silent terror, lay on the ground, its beam pointing uselessly into the sky, creating a pillar of light that seemed to mock the profound darkness that had swallowed her whole. There was no scream this time, no struggle, just the light and the lingering metallic scent of the curse, now laced with something else, the faint, unmistakable smell of ozone, like a storm that had passed too close, too quickly. Liam and Mark stood utterly paralyzed, their breath caught in their throats. Only two of them remained, two against an unseen, unstoppable force that plucked them from existence as easily as plucking leaves from a branch. The forest pressed in, a living, breathing entity of shadows and terror. The well's curse was not just a legend. It was a hungry, ancient thing, and it was closing in. The silence that followed Chloe's disappearance was heavier than ever before, pressing down on them, promising that their turns would come soon. And as Liam's eyes, wide with unspeakable horror, met Mark's, a new, terrible realization dawned on them. They weren't just being hunted. They were being herded towards something, towards the source. The air thickened, a palpable weight pressing down on Liam and Mark, crushing the last vestiges of their hope. Chloe's flashlight, a defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness, still lay on a leaf-strewn ground, its beam cutting a stark, lonely column into the inky blackness above. Its silent witness intensified the horror of her abrupt, soundless disappearance. Mark, his face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, stumbled backward, his eyes wide and unfocused, fixed on empty space where Chloe had stood mere seconds before. No, not Chloe, he gasped, his voice a raw, desperate whisper, as if uttering her name might somehow conjure her back from the abyss that had swallowed her. She's gone too. Liam felt a scream clawing at his throat, but no sound escaped. His muscles locked, his mind reeling from the relentless, escalating horror. Sarah, then Chloe, plucked from existence with terrifying ease, leaving no trace, no struggle, just a chilling void. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. They were next. They were utterly, irrevocably alone in a forest that was no longer just a forest, but a hunting ground for something ancient and unspeakable. The sensation of being watched intensified, a burning gaze that felt like ice on his skin, a pressure that squeezed his lungs, making every breath a battle. "Run, Mark. We have to run." Liam finally choked out, grabbing Mark's arm, pulling him from his paralyzed stupor. His own legs felt like lead, but a primal, desperate will to survive surged through him. They bolted again, plunging deeper into the hostile labyrinth of Blackwood Forest. The trees, once majestic and imposing, now loomed like skeletal guardians of a forgotten horror, their branches clawing at the bruised sky. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and writhe, roots coiling like serpents, threatening to trip them with every frantic stride. The cold was no longer just a chill. It was an invading entity, siphoning the warmth directly from their bodies, leaving them numb and shivering uncontrollably. The metallic, acrid scent of the curse intensified, mingling with a new, sickening aroma, a faint, cloying sweetness like decaying flowers and stale blood that clung to the air and threatened to suffocate them. It was the smell of the thing that hunted them, a scent of ancient, unholy life. The whispers returned, no longer faint or ambiguous. They coiled around Liam's mind, distinct yet unintelligible, a cacophony of alien voices that seemed to resonate from within his own skull. He pressed his hands to his ears, trying to block them out, but they only grew louder, drilling into his sanity. Mark, stumbling beside him, was clearly hearing them too. He whimpered, his eyes rolling back in his head for a terrifying second before he snapped back to reality, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. It's everywhere," Mark cried, his voice laced with a raw edge of madness. "It's in my head. It's telling me, it's showing me things." He tripped again, falling hard, his flashlight skittering across the ground and extinguishing, plunging them into even deeper darkness. Liam fumbled for his own, its beam trembling as he swept it across the forest floor. "What is it showing you, Mark?" Liam yelled, fear and a desperate need for answers overriding his own terror. Mark scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with a horrifying revelation. The well is not just a well, it's a mouth, a gaping maw to other places. It's showing me things from there, twisted things, creatures with too many limbs, too many eyes, things that crawl in the dark between worlds. His voice rose to a shriek, pure, unadulterated terror ripping through him. "They're hungry, Liam. They've always been hungry. A sudden, jarring shift in the ground beneath them sent a jolt of alarm through Liam. The earth itself seemed to groan, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through their very bones. The air grew impossibly heavy, charged with a raw, primal energy that felt like 1,000,000 volts of electricity. The whisper swelled into a deafening roar, a chorus of inhuman voices that screamed directly into Liam's soul, overwhelming his senses. He squeezed his eyes shut, tried to fight against the onslaught, but the images were already forming in his mind, vivid and terrifying. He saw it, not with his eyes, but with a dread certainty that transcended sight. The well, no longer a simple stone cylinder, but a pulsating, organic orifice, its depths swirling with a viscous, inky blackness that seemed to writhe with unseen life. He saw fleeting glimpses of monstrous forms, tentacles unfurling, eyes like burning coals, vast cavernous mouths filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth. They were ancient, primordial, things that predated humanity, things that belonged to a reality far removed from their own. The well wasn't just a sealed prison. It was a hungry portal, a breach in the fabric of existence, and that had just torn the scab off. The curse wasn't a single entity. It was the essence of this other world seeping through a corrosive, malevolent tide. When Liam opened his eyes, gasping for breath, the forest around them seemed to twist and distort, the shadows now not just shadows but ephemeral, shifting outlines of the horrors Mark had described. The trees themselves seemed to pulse with a sickly, internal light, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms, no longer just trees, but sentinels of the nightmare. They were being driven, herded back. The path, once random, now felt deliberately constrained, funneling them towards an unseen destination. "We have to go back to the well," Liam stated, the words a chilling realization, not a choice. "He wants us there. It's been leading us back." The terror was still there, but a cold, desperate resolve was beginning to form. If they were going to die, he would at least try to fight back, to seal the maw they had foolishly opened. Mark stared at him, his face a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. "Back? Are you mad? We can't go back to that thing." But before Liam could answer, a new sound pierced the night, one that stole his breath and froze his blood. It was a wet, sucking sound like something being pulled from thick mud, followed by a series of frantic, muffled struggles. Then a single, choked gurgle abruptly cut short. Liam's flashlight beam, already trembling, danced wildly. Mark was gone. Not a whisper, not a scream, just the chilling sound of his struggle, muffled as if he had been dragged into a dimension just beside their own. The leaves on the ground were undisturbed. There was no sign, no struggle, no body. Just the lingering, cloying scent of the curse, now sharper, more intense, like a predator's breath hot on Liam's neck. The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying in its finality. Liam stood alone, the last of the Nocturne Explorers. The weight of his friends' disappearances pressed down on him, a crushing burden of guilt and despair. But beneath it, a desperate, incandescent rage began to burn. He wouldn't just be another victim. He would fight. He turned, not to flee, but to face the direction from which the terrifying presence seemed to emanate. He could feel it now, a cold, vast emptiness behind him, pushing him forward. The forest, a blur of terror just moments before, now revealed a distorted, impossible path leading directly back to the clearing. He could see the faint, sickly glow emanating from the well, a beacon of ultimate despair. The whispers were a roaring chorus now, promising torment, promising oblivion. He was the last one, and the well was waiting. He had to go back. He had to try. The return journey was a descent into pure, unadulterated madness. The forest warped around him, branches whipping at his face, roots coiling to trip him, the very air of viscous resistance. He was no longer running from something. He was running towards it, compelled by a force beyond his will, a desperate, suicidal hope. The metallic stench grew overpowering, tasting like blood in his mouth. The whispers no longer echoed in his head. They were a tangible presence, slithering across his skin, caressing his ears with promises of pain and eternal servitude. He could feel the entity now, a vast, formless shadow pressing in from all sides, its malevolent with a crushing weight. Finally, he burst into the clearing. The well stood before him, a gaping, obsidian maw in the moonlight. The granite slab, once so heavy, now seemed to float slightly above the well's rim, suspended by an unseen force, revealing the swirling void beneath. The alien ruins carved into its surface pulsed with a faint, unholy light, a sickly green that stained the moss around them. From the abyss, a low, guttural thrumming vibrated through the earth, a sound that resonated with the primal fear deep within his chest. It was the heartbeat of another world, bleeding into theirs. He could see them now, not clearly, but as shifting masses of darkness within the well's depths. Glimpses of multi-jointed limbs, of eyes that reflected no light, of shapes that defied human geometry. They were vast, ancient, and utterly alien. They were the things Mark had seen, the things the legends had whispered about, and they were reaching, silently, invisibly, for him. Liam stumbled forward, driven by a desperate, illogical impulse. He had to close it. He had to undo what they had done. He scrambled towards the granite slab, his hands reaching for the corroded chains, ignoring the chilling cold that emanated from the well, ignoring the whispers that shrieked directly into his mind, promising agony. He grasped the chain, the rusted metal biting into his palm. He pulled with all his might, straining every muscle, his teeth gritted in a silent scream of defiance. The slab groaned, a tortured sound, but it didn't move. It was anchored by something beyond physical strength, held open by the very power it contained. He pulled again and again, tears of frustration and terror streaming down his face. The malevolent presence around him grew, pressing down, crushing him. He felt slender, invisible tendrils brush against his ankles, his arms, a chilling caress that promised immediate oblivion. The air around the well shimmered, a distortion in reality, and for a split second, he saw a monstrous, elongated shadow detach itself from the well's depths, reaching for him with a clawed appendage that was more bone than flesh. He screamed then, a raw, primal sound of absolute terror and despair. He pulled one last time, a futile, desperate heave, but the slab remained stubbornly open, a gateway to a living hell. The shadow loomed closer, its form solidifying, its eyes, twin points of malevolent, burning red light, locking onto him. He was trapped. He was consumed. The last thing Liam felt was an unimaginable cold, a draining of all warmth and light as the shadow engulfed him. He felt himself being pulled, not down into the well, but into the well's very essence, a sensation of being stretched, distorted, and absorbed by something vast and impossibly ancient. Then there was nothing, no sound, no light, no sensation, only an endless, profound darkness. The well remained open in the clearing, exactly as they had left it. The granite slab hovered, defying gravity, a dark sentinel over the abyss. The sickly green light still pulsed from the ancient ruins, and the faint, guttural thrumming continued to emanate from its depths. The metallic, acrid scent of the curse hung heavy in the air, a permanent stain on the Blackwood Forest. The Nocturne Explorers were gone, vanished, absorbed, but the well was not sealed. It had never been sealed. The legends were not just warnings. They were an incomplete truth. The well was not a place to be opened. It was a fundamental rift, a perpetual wound in the fabric of their reality. It had always been open, merely dormant, waiting for a foolish touch, a curious mind, to awaken the horrors within. The seal was not a barrier, but a thin veil, easily torn. And now, with the veil ripped, the whispers would continue, slithering out into the world, luring new prey. The monstrous forms would continue to stir in the darkness below, their hunger insatiable, their ancient eyes fixed on the world above. For the well was not a point of entry. It was the beginning, a portal to an endless, living nightmare that had only just begun to bleed into their world and would never close.